回れ回れ回れ水車回れ回ってほいさん呼んでこい回ってほいさん呼んでこい
Celebrated for their ancient techniques and distinctive style, woodblock prints have become a widely recognised and iconic Japanese art form. In the mid-1800s, Japan ended a long period of national isolation and, as a consequence, became open to imports from the West. In turn, Japanese art came to Europe. In the middle years of the 19th century, Japan was awash with art prints, and discarded printed woodblock pictures frequently became packaging for ceramics destined to Europe. As a result, the Japanese woodblock style was discovered and appreciated long before they were imported as works of art in their own right. In 1862, a Madame de Soyer and her husband opened the first shop in Paris devoted exclusively to imports of Japanese artwork. The shop attracted a clientele of artists and creatives who figured prominently in fostering the French and European interest in Japanese aesthetics. The influence on Western culture of all things Japanese became known as Japanism. The fashion reached all aspects of popular culture, influencing clothes, furniture, literature. Indeed, the comic opera The Mikado was created by Gilbert and Sullivan in 1885 and capitalized on the burgeoning fashion for Japanese style. Japanese woodcut prints became a source of inspiration to artists in many genres, particularly the Impressionists, and Claude Monet was a great enthusiast. Van Gogh moved to Paris in 1886, and while sharing a flat with his brother Theo, they built up a sizable collection of these artworks. Vincent, in his letters, refers to having hundreds of prints, and we can see that as well as being influenced by them directly, he incorporates them into his pictures. Artists learnt that they didn't have to conform to Western traditions of composition, perspective or proportion. Van Gogh, influenced by his collection, started using large areas of simple colour and bold outline, suppressing the illusion of depth in favour of a flat surface. On the other hand, the artist Hokusai had adopted a version of the European style of using perspective, which he'd learnt as a young man. Vanishing point perspective came to Japan in the 1740s, but was considered a novelty, and the earliest perspective prints were used for peep shows. It's ironic that perspective was not seen by the Japanese as a great advance in art or science, but merely as a novelty suitable for toys. Hokusai uses this knowledge in his work The Haunted House, printed from around 1790. The Great Wave of Kanagawa is Hokusai's most famous work and the most famous Japanese artwork in the world. Printed sometime between 1829 and 33 in the late Edo period, it was the first print in Hokusai's series of 36 views of Mount Fuji, and it was this series of views that established landscape as a genre in Japanese art. The image depicts an enormous wave threatening 3 boats in Sagami Bay with the sacred Mount Fuji in the background. It includes a signature in the top left-hand corner with a rectangular cartouche stating the title series. Over his career, Hokusai used more than 30 different names, always beginning a new cycle of works by changing it, letting his students use the previous names. In Japanese woodblock printing, the artist's drawing is taken to a horishi or block carver who glues the thin washi paper to the block of usually cherry wood and then carefully carves away to form a relief of the lines of the image. So in the process the drawing is actually lost. Finally, after making a block for each colour, a surishi prints the blocks, sometimes thousands of copies before the blocks actually wear out. And as a result, obviously, the first prints are sharper and more sought after than the later poorer quality ones. The Japanese themselves were influenced by their traditional designs, or wagara. These historical designs, each with their own specific meaning, date back to the 8th century and are largely inspired by nature. The Sagaiha means blue sea and waves, and it's said that the name comes from the title of an ancient Japanese court dance. The geometric and repetitive pattern with the waves overlapping are considered a symbol of peace, luck and good fortune. The Nami pattern, Nami meaning wave, that's where we get the word tsunami from, was used as a symbol of gods and of the seas. The pattern was also seen on banners and armour of the Sengoku era, which was an age of near constant civil war, in which the armies were depicted as a moving wave. The pattern represents strength and the churning and flowing of the wave form. This time I haven't used watercolour paper, I used Daler Rowney mixed media artboard, which is lovely for drawing on and very smooth and thick like cardboard, but it's not quite so brilliant for watercolour, so it won't make a very flat wash, so be aware of that. I started off being very careful with the drawing, but after a while you get an idea of the repetition in the fingers of the waves. So think of those Japanese wagara patterns and feel free to make your own interpretation. After drawing, I used a gel pen to ink the lines. The one I used wasn't totally water-fast, but didn't smudge too much, so it was sort of okay when I applied the watercolour. So check your pen first to make sure that the ink's not going to go running all over the place. Don't ink the clouds because that's a much softer effect. They're more like watercolour. You'll need some masking fluid for the bubbly splashes. If you haven't got masking fluid, you could use a wax resist or perhaps a white pen, which will also come in handy for you to tidy up at the end. Prussian blue was one of the first synthetic pigments, and when it was available, known as Berlin blue to the Japanese, they absolutely loved it. it was a lovely strong blue and it didn't fade like the blues they'd been using previously. If you haven't got Prussian blue in your palette, you could use Tharlow or maybe Windsor blue. I also used yellow ochre and a little bit of alizarin crimson.